Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good evening, everyone.
Evening, doctor.
How are you all?
Salam, Prof.
How's everyone?
Good
Okay.
evening, doctor.
Alhamdulillah, good.
Are you guys all having hujan lebat near you? Heavy rain?
Yes.
Yeah.
Outside.
So if I suddenly get cut off, it'll be because my electricity went out and my Wi-Fi went out. That happened a couple weeks ago, right before I was doing a webinar. And so the heavy rain came on, started, and then my electricity went out. So I lost my Wi-Fi. So if that should happen, just hold on and just give me a few minutes and I'll get back on, inshallah. Okay, so we've got almost everyone here, I think. Were you all able to upload the assignment? Yeah? Anybody have
Yes, Prof.
Anybody have any trouble uploading the assignment? Did anybody have any trouble with the assignment? I think it was pretty straightforward, right? Any problems? No?
No problem.
Nana, are you in your car?
Yeah, because I want to present today, so I need to find a better connection.
You're gonna be presenting from your car?
Oh, of course. I don't know. At first, I go to Subway, but suddenly, I asked the permission, and then they play music, so I just go out.
Oh
Because today I
no.
want to present, so I'm afraid there will be noise.
Oh.
Sorry, Prof.
No, don't be sorry. You don't have to say sorry. I'm sorry for you that you have to do it from your car. Well,
It's okay. It's okay.
okay, whatever works for you. Don't worry about it. Don't apologize. It's okay. These are
Okay, thank you,
we're
Prof.
in difficult times, so we just make do with what we have. So the rest of your team is also ready to present?
Yeah, I think so. I saw Mira, but I don't see Dina. Dina, are you here?
Yes, I see her. You see Hadi. Hi, Hadi. Getting comfortable. Okay. All right. So let me just start. Just quickly go over the plan for the class tonight. Inshallah. Hold on a second. Okay, so just briefly. Sorry, my computer is acting strange. 1 second. Why is it hanging like that? Okay, so yeah, just just to remind. So I noticed on the reading presentation list schedule. Uh-oh. My computer is doing strange things. Hold on 1 second. Okay, so week 8, week 13. So when I went back to Putra Blast, I realized why. Obviously, because there's no readings uploaded that week for those 2 weeks. Sorry. The reason being because week 8 is youth-centered program planning is the topic, and usually when we have the class on campus, I will give a hard copy chapter from a book. And I don't have the book at home because I didn't bring it back with me. And then I was not able to photostat and then upload it. So I'm going to just do the presentation that week, okay? So week 8, I will be the presenter, all right? Week 13, I haven't decided on a topic yet because it has to do with, I believe it's related to, what's the topic again? Youth roles in society or something. So anyway, I'm going to go back and fix the topic for that. And that week, maybe we'll have a guest presenter, possibly. Okay. Or we'll do something a bit different that week. All right. So that's week 13. All right. So we can just stick to the existing schedule. You can just plan accordingly to what's on the schedule. All right. So week 8 and week 13, I'll take care of, inshallah. Okay, so tonight we'll be moving into a topic called youth development models, and The reading presentation is on something called developmental relationships. All right. So this is developmental relationships are a very important concept in youth development and understanding youth development. They sort of form the foundation of how young people develop within the context of their relationships with others. So this is a very important topic. And then after the reading, I hope if there's time, I have an activity that we're going to do based on a video of a very interesting and very unique school, a headmaster actually in Malaysia, Mr. Sangha Senaya, who's the headmaster of a school, secondary school. I think it's a secondary school, maybe it's a primary school. Anyway, and then we're going to try to apply the lesson or the information from the reading to that particular school, and then try to extend that to the education system in Malaysia. All right, so how can we use developmental relationships approach to understanding education in Malaysia, and how can we improve education by using a youth a developmental relationships model? Okay, so that'll be our activity later. So but first we'll let the presenters present the reading material for the week. All right, so I'll come back to this after the reading, assuming there's time. There goes my computer. It keeps doing this, I don't know why. Sorry. All right, so okay, so any questions before we start? Problems, concerns? Anyone want to share anything? No?
Prof,
Yes,
I
Dina.
have actually last week I was about to ask you, but regarding the McFarlane movie.
Oh, yeah.
As the movie is a athletic kind of movie, right? So they do running, but as you can see, the actors, the build up of their body is kinda big and buff. So I think it's kinda unusual because for the like cross country, it is a long distance running. So usually they have a very lean type of body.
Yeah,
but as I feel like all of the runners are a bit buff and
we call stocky in English. Yeah, stocky. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm kind of
Yeah,
curious.
if you that's a good question. Thank you for sharing. If you noticed at the end of the movie when they showed the real people, the real characters, even those guys are quite bulky, and I think it has to do with the Mexican American culture. The fact that you have to really understand again their context, where they're coming from, their lifestyle. They are coming from families of vegetable pickers. Okay, so running is like it's just something they do. It's like for us, for them it's like us walking. They just do it so much. It's just second nature to them. And yet Mexican American, the sort of culture and diet of Mexican Americans, they eat a lot of rice and beans. Okay, it's part of their culture. And so I think that has a lot to do with their physical makeup. All right. And as you can see, it's a little bit like Malay culture. They love to have these big family dinners. They eat a lot. They eat regularly. They really value and cherish food. Especially because they're mostly poor people, right? So they really value and appreciate having nice food and so forth. But it's a lot of it is cultural. In fact, when I visited the southwest United States, I'm from the northeast United States, as you know, the U.S. is a very big country. But I spent some time in the southwest U.S. I have family that lives there, and when I went out in public there, I noticed that a lot of the people of Mexican heritage or background, they tend to be quite big in terms of their body frame, and I think a lot of that is cultural, right? But it doesn't detract from their ability to run because they run all the time. You know what I mean? It's just that's kind of the whole point, is that building on people's strengths, right? Like when the coach White and his daughter were sitting on the stands and they're watching the kids run around the track, and they go, and the little girl's like, wow, they really run fast. Like it's just what they do. It's just second nature to them. It's their strength. It's one of their strengths. And so one of the points of that is to build on people's strengths, recognizing the things that they already do well, and then using that as a platform to take them further, right? To give them sort of larger expectations of what they can do with their lives. How can they use those strengths to benefit themselves in other ways, right? And so it was sort of like building on their ability to run allowed them to do so many things, right? From there, they became champion runners. They went to college. They were able to uplift their families, right? Just by recognizing the fact that this is one of their strengths. Okay, and so that's like the positive youth development approach is like that. You try to identify what people's strengths are, and then you build on those strengths, and allow those strengths to take their lives in a sort of upward mobility, upward and new directions, right? And so that's the power of that movie and that story is really that. So, but that's a good observation you made, and yeah, I think it is. It's very interesting, And it wasn't just the actors that they chose; they specifically chose actors that look like that because that's what most Mexican Americans do look like. So, yeah, so that was a good observation. Anyone else have any comments or that they'd like to share about the movie? Anything that really struck you that you found interesting or?
Doctor, in the movie also they show about the religious part of the Hispanic community, which is McFarland, which is interesting. Yeah.
Sorry, Mutiara, what was interesting? Which part of the community?
The Hispanic community, the McFarland.
Right.
I mean, they show some of the part of some of the scene of the movie. They show about the religious part.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah,
This
so
kind of.
Mexicans are mostly Catholic, right? So, and again, being coming from a more sort of socio-economic background, yeah, of course, religion plays a very important life in the community. Absolutely. Yeah. So I mean, you can see that even though they're poor, they have there's a lot of strong community aspects and elements there, and the running team really sort of brought that out and gave them something to really center around, focus on. You know what I mean? It polarized the community, not polarized, sorry, the opposite. It brought the community together. It gave them something to rally around, right? Because McFarland is usually a place where people want to leave. They want to get out of there. Like they don't want to stay there. But this gave them a sense of pride, a sense of, something they could really be proud of, I don't know if you caught it, but like in the early scenes they show when the kids are running around the town, right next to the school is the prison. All right. And this is common in a lot of low income communities in the US. And I don't know about other countries, but in the US, they often put prisons in low income communities. And so young people growing up in those communities, they're sort of sent this message that like, you have two choices. You either go to school or you go to prison. And for a lot of those young people, they end up in prison because they don't really have any, they don't really see a future for themselves. So their expectations are, quite low. And then if they have problems with family and so forth, if they can't make it in school, they can't be successful in school, they get involved in crime or in gangs and so forth. So they end up in prison. So from a very early age, they're sort of sent this message of you're going to either end up in, successful going to school, or you're going to end up in prison. Right? And a lot of them end up in prison. So you don't see that in wealthier communities, right? They don't put prisons in wealthy communities. They put them in the low income communities. Right. So that's a really powerful psychological message that a lot of those young people grow up with. Right. So they don't have very high expectations for themselves. Right. And they don't even recognize things like, oh, running is a strength. Like they don't see it that way. They just see it as, well, I got to get to work, right? I got to get to the field, so I run. But they didn't realize what they could do with running until this coach came along and opened their eyes to the different opportunities that were there for them. Right. So if we think about that, think about the young people in our own communities, like and the strengths that they have, how can we build on those strengths to give them, a better future? Right? And that's what PYD is really all about, that's what it means to build on people's strengths, and to develop based on those strengths. So I think it's just a really good example of that, even though it's a movie, it's Hollywood and all that, but it's based on a true story. And so it's really interesting. Okay, so Roshakina said, I read from the review that why they run fast, because they have to work at the farm and have to go to school in the morning, and then after school yeah, I mean, that, like they said, they work before school, right? They go to school, and then after school they have to go back to work. Imagine how hard a life that is. I mean, can you imagine? So yeah, so Coach White used running as an outlet for the students to reach. Yeah, and he gave them a vision of what they could be, rather than this idea that I'm just going to be a picker my whole life, right? That again, that inherited identity, he was showing them a different possibility, a new identity for them, right? And so that's what a good youth worker does. That's what a good coach does. A good teacher, even a good parent, shows them their possibilities. What are the possibilities? All right. So based on that, let's have our reading presenters. You can go ahead and get started with your presentation. So who's going to start?
Me.
Okay, Dina.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I think you should be able to share. I think I said it so you can. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a really important. This is a very important article, actually, and it's an article that I draw on a lot in my own work. So, so it's let's. Oh, very pretty slides. Okay, thank you. All right, Dina, go ahead.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum, and a very good afternoon to Prof. Latif and to all my fellow friends. So we are the group for week 6. We'll be presenting on the title of Developmental Relationships as the Active Ingredient, a unifying working hypothesis of what works across intervention settings. It is by Junli Lee and Megan M. Julian, 2012. So let me introduce my fellow teammates. It is me, Dina, Nur Shahana, also known as Nana, and also Amira. So this is our content. Will be consisting introduction, case studies, implication, and conclusion. So I'll straight away get into the introduction. So in this article, the article mainly I will briefly introduce the main thing that is being said in this article. The article discusses on the developmental relationship in the context of developing the children and youth across few types of settings. In this article also, the developmental relationship are characterized as human interactions, and there are elements of emotional attachment to it. So the article touched on with progressive. They say that with progressive joint of activities in the children and youth, with a balance of power will gradually shift from the developed person to developing person. This simply means that, okay, as an adult, we try to educate our children. So we as a developed person, giving our knowledge to our children, as time goes, they will be receiving knowledge and continuing developing that in time, meaning that we'll be transferring the power of having the knowledge from us towards them. And also in this article, they talk on the few case studies as it demonstrates the presence of the present and also the absence of developmental relationship, and to see what is the impact, whether it is with the presence, whether it is make it more effective or it will be ineffective. Last but not least, the article wrapped on the final combination criteria elements in the developmental relationship. So I will, just because in this article, these two words are mainly being taught, so I will define the main terms. Developmental relationship is being characterized by attachment, reciprocity, progressive complexity, and balance of power in promoting positive development for the children and youth. The second one is the active ingredient. It is defined as critical component of an intervention that is responsible to produce in producing the desired change in the outcome that we want. For an example, the sodium fluoride in toothpaste. This, I would like to give an example during, like, I think most of us, like during the high school, which take the English, like science stream, during our chemistry class, there will be learning about periodic table, right? So you can see that some of the, the ingredients are very reactive, and some of it are not that reactive and very less reactive. So with the active ingredient, with the presence of this active ingredient in this developmental relationship, it will eventually give a positive outcome in developing the children and youth.
Thank you, Dina. Can you go back to that slide? I just want to add a few things. That's a good introduction. Yeah, so this article actually it's a lot more straightforward than it sounds. It's a rather academic title, but basically what they're trying to show is that in any setting, in other words, in any kind of youth program, school, orphanage, any setting where young people and adults are interacting, really, is there a single component, a single process, activity, what they call an active ingredient, that determines the success of that program or setting? Okay, what is that one thing? And they try to identify this one thing as developmental relationships. And so the article first explains what developmental relationships are, and then it gives examples from different settings, from studies, showing, sort of proving their hypothesis or supporting their hypothesis. So for example, one example in a school, one example in, I think it's an orphanage, another example in an old age home, okay, to show that if this active ingredient is present in that setting, okay, meaning developmental relationships, if there are strong developmental relationships in that program or setting, there will be effective sort of outcomes, okay, from that program or setting, okay. In other words, they're trying to distill what is that main ingredient. That's why they call it the active ingredient. You know, like in toothpaste, what is it that actually cleans your teeth? It's the sodium fluoride, right? In Panadol, what is it that actually makes the headache go away or whatever? It's the what's the active ingredient? I can't remember. In Panadol, such as an A.
Paracetamol.
Yes, paracetamol. Thank you. Okay, so they're trying to show that in social settings we have the same concept of an active ingredient. And so really what they're saying here is that it's not so much like we often are told that when it comes to a successful program, it's based on, you know, the numbers that you get, or the number of this, the number of that, the type of curriculum, the content of the curriculum. What they're saying is that none of that really matters all that much. What matters mostly is whether you have this effective developmental relationship. And if you have that, that outcome will be positive. All right. And so that's really what the article is trying to do, minus all the academic jargon that makes it complicated. Okay. All right, Kirina. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. All right. Next. So by Fryer, Pawson, Tiley, Swartz, Thatcher, and Kirby, they say that they quote that the various uses of incentive and accountability to reform educational system or social services are rooted in the behaviorist theories. So I read on the slide, not that deep on behaviorist theory, by Skinner, believe that environment determines our behavior. Like this is the opinion by Skinner. And according to his view that people have consistent behavior patterns because they have particular kind of response tendencies. So this means that over the time, people learn to behave in particular ways. Skinner didn't think that his opinion that during this childhood stage, he did not play, especially not as important role in shaping the youth personality. Instead, he thought that personality develops over the whole time, the whole lifespan of a person. And people's responses change as they encounter new situation in their lives. So there's few also views by Bandura who pointed out that his view on people learn to respond in particular ways, of course, by watching other people. So who, like, we are looking for role models. So by looking at the people, we learn how to respond, or we learn how to learn new things. And Bandura also agrees that personality arises through learning, and he believes that conditioning is not it is not automatic, but and also it is not natural, like mechanical process, but it is a like can I say it is a cognitive process where we can learn and develop our response.
So, oh, sorry, go ahead, Dina. Sorry.
Yeah, that's all.
No, so in light of what you just shared with us about behaviorist theories, this quote here that you have on the screen, the various uses of incentives and accountability to reform educational system or social services are rooted in behaviorist theories. Can anybody take a guess at what they think that means? Based on what Dina just described and then on your own understanding? What do you think that means? Just make sure to unmute. Yeah.
I think in order to reform the educational system, actually the most important thing that educational systems or the teachers must take a look into is the behavior theories, like the behavior of the students.
So you think that's what this quote means?
Yeah, kinda. So actually, this is emphasizing how important relationship is. That's why it is behaviorist theories. I think so, Doctor.
Okay, anyone else?
Professor?
Yeah, Mahfouz.
I just try to give from what I understand. Okay, behavior theorists believe that we can change human behavior, which human behavior is not natural. It's something that caused by environment. So most of them believe that they can change using, by for example, reinforcement and also punishment.
Yeah.
So whatever that we have gone through the school system, they have used the punishment and also reinforcement in order to guide, in order to shape
Condition
our
us.
behavior. Yes.
Yeah.
That's what we come for. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's what they're referring to here and this is what they commonly use to attempt to reform education and social services. Much of it is rooted in behaviorist theories, the use of reward and punishment to condition us to change our behavior. Okay, so they're just establishing that first in the article. They're just trying to show us that in most efforts to create effective programs, whether it's in education or outside of school and social services, they often rely on behaviorist theories. And if you look at our school systems, like Mahfouz just mentioned, it's almost entirely designed according to behaviorist theory. Very much of it. It's reward and punishment. Everything's reward and punishment. Trying to mold us to be what the system views as a good student or as a productive worker or a productive citizen and so forth. Most of it is using behaviorist theories. Now, even in higher education, we talk about the motivation for success so that we can get a good job, right? And that's also, and essentially, that's a behaviorist approach, is that the good job is the reward for your work that you put into your studies, okay? So it's still very much relying on behaviorist learning theories. Okay, Dina, take us away.
Another one, the continuation of the code. However, very few policies or programs based on these behaviors or economic active ingredients give consistent or lasting positive effects.
So there you go. They're looking at the research findings that show that in all, these approaches are not that effective. I mean, they may work here and there, but generally speaking, they're not that effective in terms of lasting positive, and in terms of long-term effects. There may be short-term benefits, but in terms of the long-term positive effects, what they're saying is that the literature shows that they're not actually very effective. Okay? So that's important. They just want to establish that. Yeah, go ahead.
The punishment, if we students make doing the wrong attitudes or in the school, and the teachers do the punishment methods to them. Is it a good thing, or does it affect in a bad way?
Yeah, I mean, this is not to say that you should never use those approaches or those are bad approaches. That's not what they're saying. Okay, they're just looking at whether these approaches are effective or not. And again, in the short term, they may be effective, but when you look at the long-term effects, okay, the long-term positive effects, and they're not talking about a specific behavior. They're talking about policies and programs that are based on using this approach, right? So, for example, if we were to do a macro evaluation of the education system to see whether they're more or less their mostly behaviorist approaches have led to the outcomes that they have wanted to see out of the education system, from the education system, they may find that, well, maybe it's not working that well, right? And that's where a lot of the criticism of the education system comes from nowadays, is that we're not achieving the impact of the effects, the outcomes that we want to, right? And that's where a lot of people are very unhappy with the education system. All right, so they're just trying to show that from a research perspective, again, focusing on larger policies and larger programs, looking at long-term impact, they're not actually that effective. Okay, but that's not to say you never use them. Of course, we use them. We still have to use them, and it's not to say you don't use them in conjunction with other approaches. Right, and they're often combined, these different approaches to youth development. Okay, So let's move on, and we'll see I think a bit more what this pertains to.
So in this article also propose developmental relationship as the active ingredient for positive and lasting impact. So by the National Scientific Council on Developing Child, quoted that relationships are the active ingredients of the environment's influence on healthy human development. They incorporated qualities that promotes competence and well-being. Relationship engage children in the human community in ways it helped them to define who they are, what they become, and how and why they are important to other people. The role of relationship are crucial and vital in human development, especially for children to develop their early cognitive skills, social skills, developing their personality, development, general psychological well-being, regulating emotions, conscience development, trust in others, and social skills.
Okay, so now they introduced the importance of relationships in youth development. Okay, the fundamental importance of relationships. Relationships essentially shape who we are, who we become, and so forth. Okay, they are a crucial element of our development. All right, and so you can see that they play an important role in developing all these different aspects of our personalities, of our character, and so forth. All right.
The next one, this is where the formulation of hypotheses regarding the criteria of relationship. So by Bron van Brenner, he emphasized that in relationship, they coexist these 4 criteria, which mainly emotional connection, interaction, activities, and power, and they are reciprocal. So Bron van Brenner stated that to operationalize relationship beyond the means of mere emotional attachment or connection, all these 4 emotional connection, interaction, activities, and power must coexist, referring to optimal dyadic interactions.
Okay, so a dyadic interaction is a fancy word for relationship. Dyadic means 2, so interactions between 2 people. So for relationships to be generative, for them to be fruitful, for them to result in positive development among young people, they have to include these four elements. Okay, so there must be emotional connection, right? There must be activities, there must be positive interaction, and then power. The role of power plays a big role as well. Okay, typically young people have no power traditionally in their dyadic interactions or their relationships with adults. Okay, so we're going to look at how that in a developmental relationship, how that changes, how the role of power changes in an effective developmental relationship. Okay, so Bronfenbrenner is a name you should be familiar with, especially if you're in youth studies, because he's the father of the bioecological systems theory, which is a major youth development theory in our field, and he was a prominent developmental psychologist. Okay.
Yes.
And anyone have any questions so far? Please just go ahead and ask. Okay.
Right. I'll continue. So this is a continuation of the formulation of hypotheses regarding the criteria. And now Bronfenbrenner has come out with a combination of criteria of attachment, reciprocity, progressive complexity, and also balance of power. And he further specified the criteria into these 4 and described this style of relationship can be applied to both dyadic and group relationships. Using the final combination, he formulated the terms development dyad and now broaden it as a developmental relationship.
Okay, so now we get into the definition of developmental relationship according to the authors. They're basing it on Bronfenbrenner's work. And as you can see there now, these 4 elements, the 4 elements in the previous slide have become evolved to these 4 elements, which is attachment, the socio-emotional attachment, okay, in a healthy relationship. So you have, for example, the relationship between the teacher and the student, where you have a close bond, right, where there's trust and so forth. You have the reciprocity. What does reciprocity mean? Can anybody tell me what that means from English? What does the word reciprocity mean?
Okay, two-way, like
Yeah, interaction or
interaction, yeah.
yeah. So exactly. It's a two-way interaction. So it's a sharing, really. It's a sharing. It's not one way. It's not just the adults telling the young people to do stuff, right? Which is what we're used to. It's a sharing where there's really that process of sharing knowledge, right? Of sharing experiences, giving and taking, right? Learning from each other. All right. So there's a reciprocity, a two-way sort of a two-way interaction or two-way relatedness between the two. All right. And then there's progressive complexity. And this is an important part of developmental relationships. As the young person learns, their tasks, their learning tasks get harder and harder, right? And so that fulfills the need for challenge, right? So young people, one of the attributes of young people, especially adolescents, they like challenges, right? Why do you think Mott Rumpet go down the street with their Superman style, with their legs in the back, and it's challenging. It's crazy, but it's challenging. They love challenges. And so this is part of growing up. This is part of youth development, is giving, through these relationships, the complexity of learning, it increases. It gets harder and harder, right? So like in the McFarland example, right, as the team began to race more and more, they had to take on harder and harder opponents, right? And the races got harder and harder, and they had to work harder. They had to train harder, right? But that's what a goal-oriented approach does, is that it creates this progressive complexity. So as they are getting hard, the tasks get harder and harder, they grow more and more, right? They become stronger, they become more resilient, they become mentally tougher, right? So they are developing in line with the challenges that they're given, all right? So this progressive complexity. And then eventually there's a balance of power shift. So in the beginning stages, the adults have all the power and they're guiding the young people. As the young people begin to develop, this is reciprocity, the tasks get harder and harder, they become more competent, then the power shifts and the adults are able to give more of that agency, that ability to decide, that ability to do things, gives it over to the young people and they can do it on their own. Okay, so it is a process, okay? Developmental relationships are a process that contains these 4 elements. All right. I hope I didn't say too much, Dina, because you probably have all this stuff in the slides coming up. Sorry. Go ahead. Oh, good slide. Wow, look at that. Very nice.
So as said,
you have to teach me how to do that.
Sorry?
You'll have to teach me how to do that.
This is just a GIF format.
Oh, okay.
So, as mentioned, the definition of developmental relationship, we can see so many evidence, and this is like the most basic and natural development phenomena that we always see in our life, where this is an infant from a newborn, he or she starts to crawl and then start to trying very hard to walk, stand and walk, and so on. So what enables the child to take the step by step in order to develop him or her. So as we know that since we are small, we always have this the support from our parents or from the people near us. So even for a newborn, when they just start to crawl, it is very hard for them. But with the reach of hands, the help from their parents to give support, to hold them and make them feel how to stand, and slowly by time, this what makes the developmental relationship into the positive to the positive outcomes, the outcomes of the of this developmental relationship, where there also the attachment, emotion attachment between both of them, like the child and also the parents.
Yeah, so the socio-emotional attachment is a very important foundation of it, because that's where the trust is. So once you have that trust between the young person and the adult, you have that closeness, that bond, that belief that, you know, this person is really cares about me and is looking out for my best interests, right? I can trust this person, and that's the foundation of it. Then the rest can really take off. Now you can see in the movie, it took time, right, for them to build that socio-emotional bond, right? And in all honesty, I mean, Coach White in the beginning, he was a very selfish, kind of self-centered kind of guy. He was really just trying to find a way to get out of McFarland, right? I mean, it didn't start off like purposefully that he was trying to create these nice, great relationships with these kids. He was really just trying to get out of McFarland. But you could see over time, the more they interacted, and this is where the reciprocity came in, where they began to share. He would go, remember, he went to the house for dinner. He started to learn about the family, about the culture, right? And they start to share with one another and learn about each other. He learns about their lives as pickers. So there's that reciprocity, that sharing about each other's lives. And that's where the socio-emotional attachment grew. It got stronger and stronger. And then he was able to really touch and affect the kids, because they began to trust him more. They, you know, began to like him more, and so forth. Right. So these things don't necessarily happen in stages like first stage, second stage, third stage, like the linear. It's like it's a linear process. It sort of happens in a sort of cyclical, or it can happen in different ways, really. There is no necessary rhyme or reason to how it actually happens, but the four stages are there. They're there, and within the concept of development, the relationship, these four stages are there. How they happen will be different, but as you can see, I think the movie is a great example of that. Okay. All right, Nina?
Yes, and to add on just a little bit more, the parents also will be like during the stages of giving the support towards their child. The parents will be intuitively giving, like adjusting their level of support. For example, during like from newborn and up to 1 year, it is like very high level of support, right? We need always to hug the child, hug our baby, and always giving extra attention. So this is to offer emotional encouragement, and also the as the attachment that needed between the two.
Okay.
So because the physical and emotional interaction are, how can I say, it is coexist together. So the next one, so still under this conceptual, so as the final criteria of developmental relationship formulated by Abraham van Brenner are all intercept and interdependent rather than just different criteria. So each of the criteria, attachment, reciprocity, progressive complexity, balance of power, need to be present. So, and emotional attachment from both sides, as I said just now, the child and also the parents or the caregiver, are happening naturally in a positive way and appropriately. Also in joint learning activities, such as when they are doing activities together, the adults must adjust their level of support to match their children. It is also not good, otherwise it is referred to scaffolding and feeding. Scaffolding is when an adult is giving a support to to a child. The support is, the intention of the support is to, in order to help them learn and to help them develop. But with too much of support will not also benefiting them in the long run, because this the children need to learn, need to be having the independence in them and the will to be developed. And while feeding is when the process of the adults are taking a step back from giving the support to the children. So when looking at our child is, oh, now she can already almost standing, like our child from crawling, now she can almost standing, and we are trying to, before this we will hold their hands, but now we just slightly away from them and waiting for them to make the next step. So that is called feeding. Step back from giving support.
Okay, so emotional attachment is natural, right? And a lot of people assume that like young people, like youth, don't want to have working relationships with adults, which is actually not true at all. Not only does research show this, but anybody that works with youth knows that. It's just that the relationship changes, right? When young people when they move from childhood to adolescence and then to young adulthood or emerging adulthood, if you want to call it, the relationship changes, but it doesn't ever go away. Like young people still have that need and that desire to relate to and work with adults. Just that it changes, the relationship changes, but it's still a natural relationship. In terms of progressive complexity, scaffolding and fading is a really important concept to know, as Dina just described to us. And that's that idea that, remember last week I mentioned about what is the scaffolding. If you ever drive by a building that's going up, right? You see the scaffolding on the outside, right? It's that thing that supports the building as it's being constructed, right? And that's where that's where they took the concept from, is that idea that the adult provides just enough support so that the young person can advance in whatever it is that they're doing. And then when the adult sees that the young person can do it on their own, they fade, they let go. Okay. So I think a very good example of that is if you ever look at a young person trying to ride a bike, a young child trying to learn how to ride a bicycle. So at first the parent has to like literally hold the child on the bike until they can go on their own. And then like as the child starts to get it, the parent lets go slowly, and then just a little bit of support here and there, and then slowly, and then eventually they let them go, and the child can do it all on their own. And that's just an analogy. But these things, this idea of scaffolding and fading is throughout youth development, and this even occurs with older youth, right? Of course, it occurs in different ways. But when you work with older youth, there's much less scaffolding needed, right? Maybe they just need to check in with you every once in a while. Maybe you just need to be there for them to ask you questions when they have problems, right? Maybe it's just a once a month meeting to find out how it's going with them and so forth. It depends on the group. It depends on where the young people are at. But the idea of scaffolding and fitting is a very important concept in the developmental relationship. It's providing the right amount of support at the right time, in the right form, okay, and then knowing how to do that. And that's where like teachers and coaches and youth workers and ustads and ustazas and all these people that work with young people, over time they acquire this wisdom, and they just do it naturally. They just know, okay, this guy, he's ready to go on his own now. I don't need to help him anymore, right? They just know it intuitively. They know because they've worked with so many young people, and they can see how it happens, right? So that's a really important part of this whole process. Okay. All right. Any questions so far? Clear?
And this will be my last slide.
Okay.
as Vygotsky suggested, that child's learning and development are best facilitated within the zone of proximal development, ZPD, and it is defined as the distance between the actual developmental level as determined by independent solving and the level of the potential development determined through problem solving under adult guidance or capable peers. Naturally, adult support fits as activity advances, as the child progressively learning and eventually becomes more able, more willing to exert independence and control. So the ZPD actually, as if you can see in the figure 1, time is, I can use as years. So when we are like 1 year, you can see that the adult support and control is very high, where our parents are giving lots of supports, giving lots of attention, giving lots of help at that time, because we as a child, the competency level and self-efficacy is very low. So it needs a lot of scaffolding, so high support. So, but as you can see, as time goes or we age, the years getting increasing, you can see the adult supports and control, the amount is getting lower and lower and lower, which means that when children develop their competency, their own competency and self efficacy, so meaning that the lesser support are needed, so they became more independent to survive and control their own development of life. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So that's a good illustration there, okay, of how it happens. And it's important to recognize that these things happen over time. Developmental relationships, they're not a 3-day program. This is something that happens and occurs over time. That's why the best youth development programs or initiatives are those that take place in like communities or in organizations where there's this ongoing relationship and ongoing interaction between youth and adults, right? That's why a lot of these one-off, very short-term youth development programs, they tend to not be very effective only because of the fact that this process cannot, of course, take place in such a short period of time. But of course, if you have a string or if you have repeated programs over time with a consistent group of people, like a consistent group of adults, like something that happens in school, for example, you have several years with the same group of people, or you're involved in a youth organization, so you have that extended period of time, this type of development can occur. And that's why they always refer to settings where young people thrive the most are in these kind of healthy long-term kinds of settings, right? And so this is the process. So as the adult support and control reduces over time, the child's competency and self-efficacy increases, right? To the point where that the young person can stand on their own and they no longer need the adult support. And then that's a successful developmental relationship. Okay, so that process. All right, is that clear so far? So this is the theory, right, Dina? And the next part of the article, they're going to give us some examples of how it actually happens in real life. Okay.
Yeah, the cases, other case.
Yeah, they give several cases. Okay, so should we take our break now, or do you want to start the next? I think it's already Maghrib, just came in, so I think it's a good time to break. Bole.
All right.
We want to take shorter breaks. Remember, that was the agreement.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll take our break now. Who's the next presenter?
Will be Amira.
Me.
Oh, hi, Amira. Okay, so we come back in 20 minutes. Amira Amira will start back. Okay.
Okay.
All right. See you guys in a few minutes.
Okay, Prof. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Okay, Amira, are you ready to get going?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi. Can you guys hear me? Okay.
I can hear you.
All right. But alert ahead. I am sorry if there's any motorcycle sounds because I'm living right beside MR2. So it's very disturbing with the ambulance sound and stuff. Okay.
No problem, no problem.
So okay, my part will be case studies. Okay, next slide. All right, so basically in this journal, they are showing the audience, they are trying to tell the audience how developmental relationship can be applied in order to understand developmental interventions. So in the journal, they stated the hypothesis, the working hypothesis is that human development is best promoted when developmental relationships are present and supported. So in the following case examples that we are going to go through after this, they want to examine this hypothesis with empirical evidence across a broad range of developmental interventions and settings with diverse target population. So they are trying to see in a different type of population. Okay, so and then the writer aimed to demonstrate that across many settings, the same conclusion will actually apply, which is when developmental relationships are prevalent, development is promoted, and when this type of relationship is not available or is not being used, intervention shows limited effects. So we will go through 4 different cases studies in different target population in applying developmental relationship, and the cases are orphanage improvement studies. It is in an orphanage institution, instruction and learning in elementary school classrooms, mentoring relationships for at-risk youth, and home visiting programs. So moving on to the next slide. Okay, for the first case study, basically the whole case study here, we will go through like chronology, is it? Yeah, we will come up with these 4 things: problem, objective, solution, and result. So the first case study, the problem is in orphanage institutions, they are severely socially and emotionally depriving. So there are limited opportunities for developmental relationships. Basically what they are trying to tell us here, children who are brought up in institutions often have stunted physical growth. They are aggravated behavior problems. They are prolonged attachment difficulties. And many of these problems persist even after they adopted into a new families. So in these institutions also, children will be grouped together in large same age groups with just a handful caregivers, as like compared to the normal setting of family where they will having mixed age groups with a proportional larger number of caregivers, right? So most children in this settings, in this orphanage institution setting, they eat, sleep, and play according to the same regular schedule, which might improve the ease of institutional operation, but they will limit the caregiver's abilities to give attention to the individual children. So the routine care is adult directed and without much regard for the children's need and cues. So everything is directed by an adult. So they are not able to do what they want to do. So things like eating, changing, and bathing are typically done to the child unfeelingly, without smiling, talking, eye contact, jokes, and stuff like that, right? So they will for the students to see like that. And then oh yeah, also in this journal, it says that even their playtime, they tends to be completely caregiver directed. The children will be shown how to play with the toys, and they will be corrected when they play with the toys wrong. But there's no such wrong way to play with the toys, right? So, okay, we move on to the objective of this case study is they want to restructure such institution for the explicit purpose of enhancing caregiver-child response relationships. So orphanages in St. Petersburg Russian Federation, this happened in orphanage St. Petersburg Russian Federation. Okay, so all right, the next one is solution. What they did is this team of Russian and American practitioners and researchers in 2008, they designed and implemented an intervention aimed to improve the caregiver-child relationship within the institution with the ultimate goal of improving children's developmental outcomes, both within the institutional and after adoptions. And the structural changes were implemented in the institutions to create family-like room with smaller group of children of a mixed age disabilities. Like before this, they are all same age, but right now they are trying to make it a mixed age and a lot kind of abilities that they can do. All right, and then caregivers assignments and schedules were altered. Means they are changed so that one of two primary caregivers would be in a given group of children every day, and caregivers were trained to respond to children in a sensitive and reciprocal manner, meaning mutual how we say that, like two-way communication. Yeah, interaction, two-way interaction, and to follow the child's lead instead of them keep on leading them. So caregivers also will encourage to take advantage of everyday opportunities to make interaction affectionately and reciprocally with the children, and they will have activities like feeding, dressing, bathing, and changing, like how parents would normally do with the children. And as a result, the caregiver will get to know the children better. They become more attached to each child, and they develop greater understanding of each child's abilities. And then with caregivers increasingly attending to and following the children's responses and leads, caregiver relationship naturally progress into more complex and reciprocal interactions. And then also the emotional attachment between caregivers and children will be stronger, and then before the intervention and in comparison with other orphanage institutions. So moving on to the next slide. Yeah, so here, if you can, on the left side is the idealized model of developmental relationship that Dina presented just now, where developmental relationship should look like this. But on the right side is the orphanage institution currently looking. The graph is currently looking like this. If you can see the adult control graph, it's getting higher. And however, the child's competency self-efficacy is getting lower. Because why? Because in orphanage institution, they usually will control more. They will because they are in fixed schedule, right? So the children can't really do things on their own. So that's why they are lack with competency and self-efficacy. And their emotional deprivation between the caregivers and children also are getting lower. So you can see the graph is really apart, so it's not going in the same way, basically.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so for the next one, case study number 2.
So sorry, Samira, can I just chime in here?
Yeah. Okay.
So just
Sure.
that was a very, very nice presentation of the case. I just want to emphasize the findings, the outcomes. I know you mentioned a few, but there are some additional outcomes. Just from the article, I just want to share that. So from the study that they did, after they had conducted the intervention, they found that across all domains of development, including physical growth, motor development, socio-emotional skill, and cognitive abilities, the children in the study showed some of the greatest improvements that have ever been conducted in a relationship-based developmental study. Okay, so there are tremendous gains made by the children in the orphanage, and even by the staff. The staff themselves, the caregivers in the orphanage, showed lower scores of anxiety and depression. And so from that, they concluded that both the children and the caregivers benefited from the change in the way that the program or the intervention was carried out. Okay, so there's benefit for both, not just the children, but also the adults. All right. So it was a very successful intervention. And again, it's just focusing on the quality of the relationships between the adults and the children. And this is what relationship or relatedness centered interventions look like. So the focus is not so much on the what, it's more on the how the program is being conducted. We always hear about the outcomes of the program, what we want to achieve in the program, increase in numbers, etc. Outcome. We never talk about process. They never talk about the quality of the process that occurs within the program. Okay, and that's what the developmental relationships are all about. It's about the quality of the how, of the process of how the interaction occurs, rather than just the outcome or the what. All right. Okay. Just want to add that. So go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So for the second case study, it's about instruction and learning in elementary school classroom. Well, just now it was in orphanage institution. Right now it's in school. So the problem in this case study is somewhat similar to the orphanage case, where teachers are responsible for increasingly larger classes. So seem like this second case study. So they have the instructional routines. They dominate the students' schedule and activities. Where in schools, they have their fixed schedule in what the children should do and what should not do. Stuff like that. So
this might sound familiar.
And then sorry?
This might sound familiar to many of you in terms of your schooling experiences.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then teachers' question and feedback tend to focus more on whether students' answers are right or wrong instead of the process, like what you exactly said just now. Instead of the process of reaching an answer. In focusing on outcome rather than process, teacher may miss the opportunity to gauge a student's deep understanding of the concept and to support the relationship with that student. So that's the problem with this. And this type of low quality class environment, despite the progressive complexity of academic subjects, means they have a lot of subjects. They have progressive complexity is there. But the balance of power is always tilted towards the institution requirement, the curriculum and tests, and the enforcers, which are the teachers. And they are not towards the students. It's always on the authority, like that. So consequently, students' competency and development are often declining, or they are at least developed in a highly compartmentalized manner. So students may accumulate subject knowledge without developing critical thinking skills, the intrinsic interest in learning, or a sense of self-efficacy, meaning like they do something for the sake of doing it, not because they want to do it. Yeah. And however, they might have some students who success, but when they step out from the school, they will actually expect high levels of teachers and support. They will expect support and guidance from others, and then they will succeed. So yeah, they basically cannot be independent.
Exactly.
So all right, then the objective of this in the United States, persisting educational challenges, they have encouraged continued research efforts to identify and differentiate high and low quality instruction in classroom and in the classrooms. All right, so the solution for this is they have a combination of instructional support and positive climate establishes the leading predictor of succeeding student achievement. Basically, they will have interaction among teachers and students in classroom, and they are characterized by sensitivity, not intrusiveness. They will have evaluative feedback, that focuses on learning and mastery, not just simply correctness, not just simply right or wrong. They will have encouragement of child responsibility, but not over control. Okay, so as a result, such scaffolding and fading, just now Dina said about it, scaffolding and fading practices deepens the student's learning. They shift student goals from performance, meaning, okay, basically this scaffolding and folding, they will shift students from performance. Performance means avoid mistakes, and to learning. Learning here means they use mistakes to learn, and from mistakes to learn, they will shift the learning process to the students itself. What we mean by the students itself, the students will actually diagnose the mistake themselves, and they will try to solve the problem itself. So rather than the teacher will offering correction for them every time. Yeah. So also in the study mentioned, Japanese mathematics teachers in a high quality classroom, they allow, I mean, this teacher, he allow time and opportunity for students to make mistakes and then engage the entire class in diagnosing and correcting mistakes rather than simply correcting it for the students. Yeah, so that's how they in the classroom can develop relationship and develop themselves. Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's one example from
All right. So
Japanese. Yeah.
yeah, Japanese teacher. Okay, moving on to the next slide is anything? Oh, okay. Is again, we want to compare with the idealized model of developmental relationship. We can see the teacher support and control is static. I mean, they keep giving students support and control. They don't let the students try themselves. So that's why the students' competency development is lower, is getting lower. Because teachers directed activity, because of the fixed schedule that they had. Yeah, and the teachers and student relationship also will be declining. Yeah, that's it. So for the third case study, yeah, anything?
Sorry, Mira.
Okay.
So one example of this that comes to mind when you were presenting just now is there's been several cases of students. In this case, they happen to be Malaysian students, but I don't think it's just Malaysia. I mean, this is a universal kind of thing. But there were several cases recently of in the past few years of students like some of these really high achieving students that got 14 A's on SPM, and then they went overseas and they couldn't last one semester in an overseas university, and they actually ended up coming back to Malaysia. And of course, indirectly people attribute that to this kind of thing where, they're in such a controlled environment, they can really thrive because, again, they've got all that support and control from adults, right? But when they're asked to go and stand on their own 2 feet, so to speak, in a totally different environment, they can't handle it, right? Everything just falls apart, right? And that's also because of the system and the way the system is designed, with those very rigid control mechanisms, right? Where the students are not given that room to really develop in a holistic way, right? It's very much just geared towards outcomes, right? And so this is one example, I think, of that in our local context. You can sort of see that, right? And then you've got some students that don't do very well in terms of their grades, but they end up being very successful, even in many cases successful business people and so forth, because they learn to adapt to situations, they learn to think outside the box, they learn to identify threats and how to overcome those things and stuff like that. So they've acquired a different skill set that actually really comes in handy when they are in the quote unquote real world, when they're outside of the institution of the education system, right? So this is just just one example, and I think there's a lot of examples out there. In fact, I have a colleague in our faculty. He's in a different department, and he recently told me that he was when he was young, he was actually like one of those young people that was labeled to be pretty much a failure, right? Because he wasn't very good in academics and he was always getting in trouble and so forth. And he ended up getting his PhD in the US, and now he's a lecturer, right? So, you never know. There's this notion, this idea, this concept of late bloomers, right? who are able to overcome, early deficits and stuff like that. And so that's why the environment can play a very important role. And to have this kind of environment is very important, and he does attribute it to certain relationships he had with certain adults that really helped him to overcome those challenges he had, right? So developmental relationships can be very powerful when they're used in that way, and when they can really affect young people's lives in that way. So,
Prof,
yeah,
may I interrupt?
of course,
I
of course. Welcome to interrupt.
People who not really success in academic mostly have a high EQ, emotional intelligence.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I
So
don't know. I don't know if we can say mostly. We don't really, I don't know if that would require some pretty serious research to determine that, but I think it's true. I think what you're saying is definitely true. That their intelligence is not only, book smarts, being good at academics. And I think the world is increasingly becoming a place where those other types of intelligences are becoming more and more important, as you can see the way the way the economy is changing, and the kind of requirements that different professions have now, being able to think critically, and being able to be good problem solvers, decision making, and all those things. You don't really get a lot of those things just from straight academic learning. A lot of that you get experientially, you get from having different experiences. Real experiential learning plays a big part in that, and so forth. So yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely true to an extent. We can't, I don't know if I could say mostly or whatever, but I definitely think that's true. If you ever listen to really successful business people, they'll tell you things like that. Like, they know how to read people, they know how to read situations, and all these things that you don't get from, really get from a classroom. You don't get that from a classroom. It's not that kind of learning, right?
Thank you, Prof.
So yeah, so developmental relationship. The next one Amira is going to talk about is mentoring, right? And mentoring is another one of these kind of relationships that can be very effective in that sense. Okay, so go ahead, Amira.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So yeah, the third case study will be the mentoring relationship at risk youth. So the problem here is evaluations of Big Brothers and Big Sisters program that have turned up mixed and somewhat short-lived result in terms of program impact on mentees. So just as the orphanages and classroom can be differentiated by the quality of relationship emerging in those settings, in the study of mentoring relationship, Marrow and Styles, 1995, they differentiated development relationship from prescriptive relationship among mentor and mentee pairings. All right, so here hold on, yeah, sorry. Okay, so on the surface, this seems contradict. It's a contra from the hypothesis of that developmental relationship because developmental relationship is the active ingredient for positive development. However, even relationship focused program are not the solution for the lack of developmental relationship. Okay, so just now they mentioned prescriptive relationship, right? So prescriptive relationship here are found with adult mentors who expect the mentoring relationship to produce rapid, meaningful, lasting changes and lasting changes in their mentee's life. But these mentors decided, the mentors will decide on activities and topics of conversation without the youth input. They will exhibit tendency to prescribe the activities to youth, and such tendency increase over the duration of the mentoring relationship. So the prescriptive mentoring relationship are characterized by a high degree of control from the mentors that are not responsive to the mentees need and do not fade over time. Basically, they're saying here the mentors are doing everything for the mentees. Yeah, not based on what the mentees want, because mentors sometimes they have their own goal and mentees they have their own goal. So mentee is just going to the mentors to seek help, to seek support. But in fact, the mentors here are actually giving like over control again. Yeah. So the objective of these programs like Big Brothers, Big Sisters are designed to enhance relationship between mentors and mentees as the foremost program objective. Okay, so the solution here made by the case study here is mentees are to decide what activities and whether they want their mentors to advise and guidance and also they have to include the youth in the process of negotiating the relationship. Okay, and then as a result, eventually the youth will often come to their mentors and divulge problems they have divulge problems they are having and to seek assistance. They will also have a long-term relationship. Yeah. So basically in the mentoring case, it is gradually shifting the balance of power towards the youth. Is practically important for both engagement and impact. Yeah. Okay. So
yeah.
Next slide. Again with the graph, the mentoring relation, we can see again like the mentor goals and roles. Like what I said just now, the mentor, they have their own goals. So mentees have their own goals. When mentee comes to mentor and seek help, and then the mentor just give whatever instructions and guides, support that are based on the mentor's goal instead of the mentee's goal. So you can see the inflexible plans and expectation, right? So these are all with these inflexible plans, it will make the mentee's development lower. They will not even have a development for them. So yeah, it's something like that, correct?
So over time, as you can see, actually the relationship quality really goes down because at the end of the day, the young people get frustrated. They see that their needs are not being met. It's very controlling kind of relationship, and they're just not interested in being in that kind of relationship anymore. And it's the whole idea of a one-to-one mentoring relationship is for that eventual, what they call the not transfer of power, but the shifting of power to occur. So the young person, after a while, he learns that from what he's learned from his mentor, he's able to stand on his own 2 feet, so to speak, right? But because of the rigid approach used by the mentor, the young person just loses interest. And that happens a lot in mentoring programs. They don't last because of that. So the mentor has to be really trained in developmental relationships and know how to do scaffolding and fading, and then when to, when to sort of direct or prescribe what is to be done, and then when to let the young person to decide, right? And how to meet the young person's needs, find out what their interests are, find out what their needs are, and then how to work with them in a reciprocal way and all that. So there's usually a sort of training that they go through, but when they don't, you can see it can become very ineffective, right? So another example, another type of youth development setting. Okay, so these are all different types of youth development settings, right? So different types of programs, different places where development occurs, right? So this is a mentoring program. Okay, and the last one.
Okay, so for the last case study is home visiting programs. Well, at first I was wondering what is this home visiting programs, because I don't think in Malaysia we have this, right?
Okay.
I don't know. Is it in US? Is very famous? Okay. So
no, I mean, yeah, they exist, but they're not that. I'm trying to look at the.
Yeah, it's basically like the home visitors. They are knowledge. They have knowledge on how to develop families.
Oh, this is like social. This is like social work. Actually, it's like a
social works. Yes.
Yeah.
They will actually go home, house to house to teach families on how to develop.
Yeah, I did.
So something. Okay, so basically
I did some home visiting when I was doing my social work training in the US, actually. So I know.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. So okay, the problem here is the concept of developmental relationship emerges from and is most easily applied to the understanding of the relationship between adults and children. It can also be extended to understand interventions and setting that involve an adult as the developing person. So in the context of social work and social services such as home visiting programs, the social worker are developed. The social worker are the developed person and developed person role, whereas the client or the adult is being served as the developing person. Okay, so this does not include children and adult. This is adult and adult, basically. And okay, the objective is building the relationship between the home visitor and the parent is often part of the program focus. Basically, it's about that. Okay, so the typical home visiting programs begin in first 2 years of a child's life, and they will focus on parent education. They will focus on child development, healthcare, they preventing child abuse, and parent well-being. So there is a substantial variability both within and between home visiting programs in terms of implementation and the program impact. So although there is limited research examining why some home visiting relationships succeed, whereas others fail, the available research is consistent with the conceptualization of developmental relationship as the active ingredient in home visiting programs. Specifically, home visiting programs that operate on a limited instructional or case management model by Bigman 1996, well, I didn't include here, tend to have a disappointing result. But when there is a strong home visitor and parent relationship and a focus on parenting strategies, families will actually benefit from it. Okay, so the solution that they come up with is an effective home visitor forms a trusting relationship with the parent. A personal connection between the home visitor and the parent based on trust and acceptance may help the parent see herself as worthy of empathy, respect, and patience from a home visitor. The parent may in turn embody those qualities in her own parenting. So basically, they're saying here, it's important for a trust relationship between the parent and the home visitor, because apparently one day the home visitor will no more guide the parent. So the parent must actually take all the learning process from the home visitor so that they can apply in their own family later on, not just for that time being of when they have the home visitors.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. So on the basis of a personal connection, the home visitor support is reciprocally matched to the parent's emerging competencies and needs. For a parent with a few resources and relatively low competencies, the home visitor might actively connect the parents to the resources, for example, food pantry, childcare, social support in their own community. Yeah, and as time goes by and the parents become more competent and resourceful, the home visitor support and guidance appropriately fades. So this is the fading part into a facilitator or mentoring. They just will facilitate and mentor the parents. So this gradually shift in power shift in power to to ensures that the parent becomes more competent in caring for her child and in utilizing the resources available in her community. So as a result, the parent can develop new skills, example, building relationship within a social or community network, not just with the families, but also maybe with the neighbors and friends that can last long after even the home visitor leaves the family. So however, there are circumstances where a developmental relationship between the home visitor and parent is less likely to form. For instance, a home visitor may not visit frequently, and visit may be split between multiple home visitors for one parent, or home visitors may adhere rigidly to planned curriculum content for visits without responding contingently to a parent's current competencies and needs. So dia macam it's not it doesn't mix, it doesn't, how to say, it doesn't match the family's needs and like that.
Right.
So when the power consistently tilts toward the social service institution, home visitors are more likely to form prescriptive rather than developmental relationships. Yeah, so that's why they're saying prescriptive relationship just now.
Right.
What else here? Okay, so the visited parents are more likely to develop dependent rather than self-sufficient tendencies. So the impact of these institutional features on home visiting includes short-lived visitor-parents relationship and lack of impact on parental competencies and outcomes. And with that, I'll conclude the 4 case studies that human development is best promoted when developmental relationships are present and supported.
So this
That's all
last
for
one,
my part.
oh, sorry. So
Mm.
this last one obviously doesn't involve youth development directly,
Yeah,
but it does involve it
Mhm.
indirectly, because if
Indirectly.
by helping
Eventually,
by helping
of the
parents,
parents.
it helps the young people. But they actually just, I think they also threw this one in just to show that it's not only within settings directly dealing with youth and adults, even in these adult types of relationships where the social worker or the social service worker is charged with helping the other adult, the parent, develop in terms of their parenting. It also is effective according to what the research shows. Okay, so that's just to strengthen their argument really for the hypothesis of the importance of developmental
Yes.
relationships.
Okay, so now I'll pass to Nana for implications. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Amira.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Welcome.
Okay, hi everyone and good evening. Can you hear my voice?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I will explain a little bit about implications. Okay, next, Dina. Okay, this is the practical implications that use developmental relationship as the vital to have the developmental change. So the approaches, there are 2 approaches to change in children's development, consists of complementary approaches, which is evidence-based programming and system building approach. So the evidence-based program, it uses the self-contained intervention to which are either been proven to be efficient or already been demonstrated through research and evaluation. So the example of the self-contained intervention package is the self-contained program or self-contained classroom, where the small group of students with a special needs or specific difficulties will be in a one classroom that this group of students require high supports and supervision throughout the school days. So the classroom will be instructed by classroom teacher with certain certificates such as special education teachers. And then the second one is the system building approach. This system approach, they will linking the intervention together to handle comprehensively various systematic factors that might constrain or derail children's development, such as poverty, education. I want to use PIBG as the example, or the Parent Teacher Association (PTA). This association will help the parents to facilitate the parental participation in the school. In this association, they will discuss literally everything about the students, including the disciplinary action, activities, or curriculum in schools that maybe will give the benefits to the schools or the students itself. Okay, next, Dina. Okay, the approaches is focused to make the curriculum. So they want the curriculum to include the relational interaction and let it transform to developmental relationship. And then so the problem here, the approaches or the program are being held is inconsistent and can cause the reliability and sustainability, and it's not generally scalable, as it's not effective to serve large numbers of at-risk children across settings. For example, they might put the late catch-up students with behavior problem students and autism together in a classroom. So they might they have their own needs, but the classroom will be standardized all the needs together. And then there's also in the study stated that the prolonged program is not working well because there is a social norm. The society is not supportive enough to promote the developmental change in the school and community. When there is implement of the changes, uh, in a prolonged time, the changes will be returned back to the original because there is lack of supports from the environment. Okay, why these approaches can be failed? Because the program never considered to enhance development relationship as one of its objective. They only focus to the outcomes. As it's also said, is to focus and intense in actual implementation. So they forgot about the process of. They also forgot about the process of developmental relationship. They only focus on the outcome. And then many schools provided achievement goals but not the relational goals. So the students are being neglected. They only want to reach the achievement. And then they also, in the process, they fail to promote relationship. So here the solutions that might the approaches can implement to implicate is to focus on development relationship, and the program also can identify the program that both can work and scale effectively to serve large numbers of at-risk children across settings. And then the program based on evidence, not necessarily to narrowly focus, or the system building approach, not necessarily too broad to manage the change. It should be at the optimum level where everyone can adaptively ready to change. Okay. So this is from Kern et al. Okay, the teachers often exacerbate their students' difficulties through attempt to force the curriculum on them without considering the strategies that might prevent the behavioral escalation, such as modifying tasks or allowing students to choose alternative activities. It's just like the case study in Mira explained before. As we can see that the teachers not allow the students to explore the problem by themselves, and also they don't give time to let the students to adapt to the change, but force the students to accept the change in the curriculum without considering their circumstances. Okay, next. So the second one is the macro level social change through aid and assistance. The macro level, according to Bronfenbrenner, is the influence of the society as a social, culture or history to the truth, the developmental of individual. So in this, to make social change, they will involve the developed entity and the developing entity. The developed entity is either the government or NGO, that will be the source of initial assistance, both within or between countries who need help. And then developing entity is the group that gonna receive the aids and assistance. So the key here is we need to determine the sustainable impact and positive change uh, related with these two entities, either is managed to develop developmental relationship over time or not. Okay, next. Okay, so the aid and assistance, just like we said before, the objective is to develop positive and empowering relationship between the developed and developing entities. So the problem here is there is stereotypic cycle or stereotypes storyline that keep repeating over and over again. So in this, they use poverty as the example. So when the aid arrives or the help arrive, the problem will be lessened. But when the aid leaves, the problem will be returned. So how the developed entities can do to implicate the problem is to overcome the problem is they do the approach to recognize the families who in the community who is defied the malnutrition norm, who is not used to the norm, means that there's not part of the malnutrition or poverty group, but is in the community. And then through this they will identify the families, and they will acknowledge the current capabilities of the community to help one another. So there is how its result is this one just like before, it's already said that they will be have the shift of power balance, because the developed entities will allow the community to gradually take the responsible and control over the efforts to produce the social change around the community. And then the foreign aid workers will able to shift the balance of power to the developing entity, then building reliance on aid supported materials. So they won't be too rely to the help, but they will change themselves with the help of community. Okay, the last one is the program evaluation and policy research. Basically, evaluation is to maximize the impact of the developmental relationship by adding the knowledge on how the program should be done. And then it also can identify the program specific pathway that will implement the developmental relationship and allow it to transform. Next, Dina. Okay, so the program evaluation, the objective is to determine the effect of the actual program implementation and policy on the development relationship. So the problem here, the research and evaluation are too narrow, focus on inputs and outcomes to produce the impactful program. So again, it's like with the process to implement the development relationship, to use the attachment, the reciprocity within the process. So the reason to fail because it's lack of consistent, positive, and lasting outcomes. And then they have the high pressure. They have high pressure to the implementers to develop approve such outcomes on short order. When to do the implementation, we need to have a proper planning. Without the proper planning, the outcomes might be not prolonged and it's just like short-term outcome. And then so the how the evaluation can improve is we can adopt at minimum a phased-in evaluation strategy that going to prioritize the understanding of program or policy that have impact on developmental relationship before we proceed to the implementation part. Okay, next. Before that, Prof, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, so these last three sections that I'm letting Nana go through rather quickly, they're expanding their hypotheses to different areas. So one is on program implementation, how programs are implemented, how they're evaluated, and even they talk about aid, like aid programs, like the previous one you were talking about, like for example, poverty alleviation programs and all these things. So they're looking at how this theory of theirs, this hypothesis of theirs can be applied in these different settings. Okay, so rather than focusing on outcomes, focusing on whether the policy or the program actually aims to improve developmental relationships as, again, the active ingredient. If they do that, then the outcomes will take care of themselves. But too many of these policies and programs and evaluation attempts, they only look at the outcomes and they ignore that important process, okay? So they're sort of just expanding or extending this hypothesis to these different settings and showing how it can relate to all these different settings. And so if you really want to improve the quality of all these different programs, focus more on the developmental relationships before looking at outcomes. And that's really the message they're trying to send here. Okay, so you can go ahead and conclude, I think.
Okay, conclusion, we are finally have reached a conclusion. So this again, like Dina said, the developmental relationship is coexist with the attachment, balance of power. Dina, where are you going? Okay, balance of power, progressive complexity and reciprocity. And as we all already concluded, as we already discussed, that developmental relationship is vital and important in developmental change. But don't forget about their coexist elements. They also have to be implemented together to give the impact. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, group, excellent job. Thank you for your presentation. Very nice job. I think you covered the material very well. And it was a good synopsis of everything. So what's interesting, the last paragraph of the article, they mention here, they say, one common response we receive when discussing this article with professionals who serve children, like funders, researchers, program managers, is they tend to say, we do agree with the importance of relationship building, but funders pay for and want hard, measurable outcomes, not soft, hard to measure relationships. Okay, so one of the challenges is actually measuring and showing, really proving that a program is effective because of the quality of the relationship. In other words, quality relationships are kind of hard to measure. They're not like scores on an exam, or something that can easily be determined through numbers and quantitative methods. Okay, so it does make it a bit more challenging, but as they've shown here, I think they make a really strong argument about the importance of these types of relationships in any setting, really, that deals with development, especially youth development. Okay, so with that, are there any final questions or comments?
I have one question.
Yes, Mutiara.
I'm actually still confused, like, to find the exact answer after reading this. So correct me if I'm wrong. So the treatments, the activities to build the developmental relationship is very diverse. It can be anything, as long as it contains the 4 major elements. Is that what you're saying?
Right. So those are the four components of developmental relationships. Yeah. Right. And that's why it can be applied in so many different types of settings, because those 4 elements can happen in so many different really in any related or relational type of program or setting. That's why you can do it in a school, you can do it in a mentoring program, you can do it in so many different types of programs. But what they're saying is that they're fundamental. In other words, they are fundamentally important to achieve any kind of sort of social outcome that is educational or developmental in nature. All right. So it's really interesting, because I mean, even as a parent, you can use these 4 elements. And I have 2 teenage kids, and I apply this all the time when I face a difficult teenage issue or something. But really, I find it to be, and I've used it in many different settings, and many different. I looked at all the different ways that I've interacted with young people throughout my career, and I find it to be very useful, very effective, actually. So now what I would like to do is I'd like to have us do an activity. I'm going to break you guys up into groups. All right. So let me just show you on Putra Blast. I have put up, don't know if you caught this before, but I put up a video. Okay. And this is a video about, it's called Headmaster Sangha Senaya.
Yeah.
I think Prof left.
Yeah, Prof left. Okay. Dina, conduct the class, Jay.
We end the class then.
Prof, please unmute.
Okay, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to break you up into small groups using Zoom. Okay, so you're going to, and then you can in your little groups, you can watch this video and then go ahead and answer these questions. Okay. And then you can record your ideas here on the Padlet link. Okay. So the question is, how does Headmaster Sangha's approach utilize developmental relationships? Or how could he? In other words, you may not find all 4 of those elements in this video, but I want you to use your imaginations, right? He has a very nice foundation for what he's doing in his school, and he's having a lot of success. How might he use developmental relationships in this school to further his work? In other words, okay, how could it improve on what he's doing? Okay, number 1. And then the second question I want you to answer in your group is, how can developmental relationships as a concept be implemented in our Malaysian secondary schools to improve youth development? Just give some examples, give some ideas. All right, I want you just to think a little bit about application, how this might be applied in our current school system. Okay, because most of you went through the school system and you know it very well. So think about that, how it might be applied. All right. Okay, so I'm going to break you up into groups. Now, you should be able to share your screen so you can watch the video together in your small groups. If you can't, just let me know. I've never tried this before, so it's the first time. All right. So just let me know if it doesn't work. All right. Is that clear? Instructions clear?
Okay, Prof.
Okay. So let's see. We got about 20. Let's see. We got 27 people. So maybe we'll do like groups of 4, like 8 groups. Yeah. So it'll be like 3 or 4 to a room. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna do it now. So hopefully this will work. So you should be getting an invitation to join a room. So just go ahead and click on it. Yeah. And when you're done, come back to the main group. Jezin, did you get the invitation to join the group? And Miaoshen. Are you guys there?
Is there on me, Prof?
Yes.
Our group have put all the points in the Padlet, but however, when I see the Padlet, it's already empty. What is it?
Really? I'll share my screen in a minute. I think I see them all.
Okay.
Maybe on your side it's empty.
I see.
It's right. I'll share the screen. You can see.
Okay, okay.
All right, let me pull everyone back in. Okay, everyone's back. Okay. All right, almost everyone's back. Okay, I think that worked. Although the Padlet, I messed up the Padlet. I wanted to have one column with question 1 and then one column with question 2, and then it all sort of ran together. So I don't know what happened there, but let me just share the screen here. So I changed the format in the middle while you guys were typing. Still, oh, you guys are still typing, okay. Okay, so let's just look at together some of these, some good answers here. And I don't know if you had enough time to really do it. Maybe the second question there wasn't enough time, but it was an interesting video, right? What he's doing is some really interesting, huh?
Yes, Prof. Very interesting.
Yeah, I think he's got a very good approach. I think there's a strong element of values-based education. So he doesn't only talk or he doesn't only teach about SDGs, but he is really showing the students how to live those teachings. And that's a very powerful way of educating. So that in and of itself, I think, has a lot to do with his success and what he's trying to do. But I just wanted to see if we could maybe identify some areas of this active ingredient, developmental relationships, from the video. Maybe it's hard to really get a lot from the video. Sorry?
Sorry, Prof. Sorry.
It's okay. Everything okay? We're good? Okay. So let's just go through some of these. All right. So I don't think we'll have time to go through all of them, but just some of them. So in terms of question 1, okay, so Amira, hi Zoom. Okay, the concept of SGD in school administration has helped Sangha a lot into positively shaping the young person's identity and helping the young person develop a thriving mindset. Okay. Sangha emphasized hands-on, practical, independent learning, which is more effective in improving students' knowledge and skills. Okay. Attachment and reciprocity among pupils can be seen in their involvement of school projects like gardening, carrying out environmental protection, and preservation activities to create more comfortable and enjoyable school atmosphere. Okay, those things are all definitely true. Do they relate to developmental relationships specifically? What do you think? Anyone? You guys are all looking at the Padlet, right?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes,
this
Prof.
first,
Okay.
so Amira and Haizum's answer. So I'm just wondering, question one, that these three things that they mentioned are all very true, obviously, about what he's doing. And so do they relate specifically to developmental relationships? What do you think? What does the rest of the class think?
Some kind of. Kind of.
Okay. This is your answer, Haizum. I wanted to hear from somebody else.
Oh, okay.
It's called peer review. We're doing peer review now. Okay, so the concept of SGD, all right, is definitely, yeah, he's definitely using that as a strong learning tool. There's no question, you know. And you can see the young people are, yes, they're developing that thriving mindset and so forth. Okay, they're learning hands-on, practical, independent. Okay, that looks like it's that going on. All right, so that's possibly more effective in improving their knowledge and skills. Okay, the school is doing very well. We know that. They mentioned that the school is performing very well. So how do those relate to developmental relationships specifically? Based on those 4 dimensions that we spoke about during the class.
Hands-on and practical and more independent learning.
Okay, and that's, you would relate that to which of the 4 elements of developmental relationships?
Is it reciprocity?
Attachment?
Sorry, can't hear you.
Interaction.
Reciprocity.
Reciprocity. Okay, well, it could be. It doesn't say here specifically, because reciprocity has to do with the interaction and sharing between the teachers and the students, right? So yeah, usually when there's practical, hands-on type of experiential learning, there's often more engagement between teachers and students. That's true. Okay, so Amira and Haizum don't specifically say that, but we can assume that that's probably happening. As you can see, they're doing a lot of project-based learning, and they're doing it together. That's the power in what he's doing. He's not just telling the students to go out and do it while the teachers are sitting in the school. He's having them going out and doing it together. And so, yeah, so that is what's facilitating the reciprocity, right? Because, you know, when you do projects together, you're interacting, you're sharing, you know, you're working together, you know, there's that feeling of camaraderie, that feeling of partnership, right? And that's very powerful. Young people feel like they're doing adult jobs when, you know, when they're working next to adults, everyone's doing the same thing. The young people feel that sense of importance, like, well, I'm doing this really adult work. It's really important work, right? So it gives them that sense of that feeling of meaning. And I'm sure there's a lot more reciprocity that goes on because of that. Okay, so we can assume that that's happening, right? Even though we didn't necessarily see it, but we can assume that's happening. Okay, so yeah. So I think that's definitely true. And then they say here, attachment and reciprocity among pupils can be seen in their involvement of school projects like gardening, carrying out environmental protection and preservation activities to create a more comfortable and enjoyable school atmosphere. I saw in several of the other answers here, a lot of you talked about making learning fun. Now, how does that relate to developmental relationships? Making it enjoyable and fun? Because many of you wrote that in your responses.
Because when you have the emotional interaction, Prof, then you make it creates fun to them, to the students.
When it's more reciprocal, is that what you're saying?
Yes, more.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Yeah. Again, we can maybe make that assumption. You know, that typically, if you're engaging in that kind of a learning activity that's enjoyable and that's fun, there's going to be more reciprocity, right? So most likely, there's more interaction, and Also, I think like you mentioned, I think attachment as well. The socio-emotional bonding, right? That first very important phase also is facilitated through that kind of learning, right?
Prof, sorry, Prof.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
think Hadi's group, they cannot join back our meeting.
Yeah.
He said meeting error. He message me.
Ada je kak kita orang.
Tahu Hadi seorang?
Yeah.
Hadi.
According
I think
to
his laptop could.
Yeah, because according to my breakout room list, everybody's back in.
Okay, I think Hadi only. Never mind, I tell him.
They get to go home early today. Okay. So yeah, and then so the socio-emotional attachment and bonding can be, can occur like you guys mentioned here. So that's important too. So that's a good one. All right. So good. So let's see what else. Just quickly see if there's any others here. Balance of power. Okay. Yeah. Now, balance of power. He can really use this approach. One is for progressive complexity. He can make the projects more challenging and more challenging as the students learn, as they learn more about SDGs, right? They learn more about all these environmental issues and so forth. He can make the projects more and more challenging, right? And so that's a beautiful approach, because with environment and climate change, there's endless opportunities to do things, right? Projects, there's so many things you can do. And he can make it harder and harder for them. It involves problem solving, right? So that progressive complexity is definitely going to be there, right? And so that's one of the real benefits of the approach he's using. And then over time, as the students get older in the school, he can shift the balance of power and give them more and more autonomy. So they can, by the time they're Form 4, Form 5, they're leading the projects, right? So there's that balance of power can also be easily implemented as well. So yeah, so I like that you guys put that balance of power there. Okay, so yeah, it's a lot of experiential learning. All right. Fun ways of learning, okay. Experiential, okay. But again, you want to focus on how these things lead to stronger relationships. That's really what this is a relationship-based approach. All right, so how do these things relate to relationships? Okay, here's one. This will be the last one, okay? Zila Amiranya. Okay, so question 1, happy environment. Okay, there's that happy environment. All right, but again, how does that relate to relationships? Scaffolding and fading. Yeah, so headmaster introduces the idea, lets the students and teachers do the project together. Exactly. So when they learn, they gain the knowledge, and the headmasters can fade and step back from giving them the support, as also the teachers can also. The teachers might be doing it with them in the beginning, but then as the students get more and more advanced, the teachers can also step back. All right, so it gives that opportunity. All right, yeah, definitely beyond the classroom. It's a more meaningful way of learning, right? So they learn the theory in school, and then they go out and they actually apply it in the community, right? So there's definitely, and by doing that, it also builds up their relationships. Yeah, they can give ideas, give suggestions, exactly. When they're out in the field together, they can reciprocate in that way. They can problem solve together, which is really powerful as well. Okay? Well, it's 9 o'clock. I would like to go through all these, but we're out of time. So maybe next week, if we have time, I'll just go through a few of them, a few of the good ones as well, just to complete the lesson. But I think you guys got the gist of it, so that's good. Okay, so are there any other closing final comments, questions? No. Okay, so we know who our presenters are next week. Do you know who you are, I should say?
Yes, I am.
Oh, Mahfouz. Okay, who's your partner, Mahfouz?
Me.
Okay.
Hi.
Show yourself.
She's being shy. It's okay. All right. Well, thank you all very much.
Okay, Prof. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof.
Next week.
Thank you, Prof. See you next week.
Thank you,
Prof. See you next week.
Jumpa lagi, insyaAllah.
Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.